Nothing in the world like Action Park.
Before this water slide ever opened to the public, the park's owner needed to know if it actually worked. So he sent test dummies down it first. Some of them came back missing limbs. One came back decapitated. His solution wasn't to redesign the ride. It was to offer his own employees $100 each to be the first humans to go down it live. We'll get to exactly how that went, because that ride, as insane as it sounds, wasn't even the deadliest thing at this park. This is Action Park, a water park in rural New Jersey so notorious that the locals didn't call it by its real name. Healthcare workers and residents nearby had their own names for it: Traction Park, Accident Park, Class Action Park, even Friction Park. Over 18 years, this single park was tied to 6 confirmed deaths and over 100 lawsuits. And it wasn't shut down by any of that. It took the company running out of money to finally end it. This is the story of Action Park, and the man who built it on the idea that rules were the one thing standing between people and real fun. To understand how a place like this could exist, you have to understand the man who built it, Gene Mulvihill. Mulvihill wasn't a theme park designer, and he wasn't an engineer. He'd made his money as a penny stockbroker on Wall Street, running pump and dump schemes, hyping cheap, obscure stocks to inflate their price, then selling out before the price collapsed on everyone else who'd bought in. Regulators eventually caught up with him, and he was effectively pushed out of the securities industry. So Mulvihill turned his attention somewhere regulators paid a lot less attention to: a struggling ski resort in a place called Vernon Township, New Jersey. Vernon wasn't just any small town. In the early 1970s, Hugh Hefner had chosen it as the location for a Playboy club, drawing performers like Tony Bennett and Wayne Newton out to rural New Jersey. When the state legalized casino gambling in 1976, investors started dreaming Vernon could become the next Orlando, or even the next Las Vegas. Mulvihill wanted a piece of that, and because New Jersey's winters were too short and unreliable for a ski resort to survive on snow alone, he became an early pioneer in artificial snowmaking, at one point literally building a snow machine out of a jet engine. A ski resort only makes money in winter. Mulvihill wanted the cash flowing year-round, so in 1978, he opened something that hadn't really existed in this form before: Action Park. The park opened on July 4th, 1978, and to celebrate, it held 2 promotions: a Dolly Parton look-alike contest and a tobacco juice spitting contest. That was the tone from day one, not a family theme park in the Disney sense, but something rowdier, closer to a carnival that happened to have real engineering behind it. Here's the one idea that explains everything that happened over the next 18 years. Mulvihill's son Andy, who later became the park's head lifeguard, said his father didn't want guests strapped into something that just twirled them around passively. He wanted to take the feeling of skiing, where you control your own speed and your own line down the mountain, and build an entire amusement park around that same idea. In Mulvihill's mind, if the guest controlled the ride, the guest was responsible for whatever happened. It sounds almost reasonable in a boardroom. In practice, it meant handing untrained members of the public direct control over slides, tracks, and pools that had never been properly engineered for that. Take the Alpine slide. Riders sat in small carts on a long concrete track built into the ski slope, with a hand stick that controlled speed. Push forward to go faster, pull back to brake. No walls, just concrete on either side, waiting for anyone who lost control. People did lose control, regularly. And within 2 years of opening, this exact ride would produce the park's first death. But we're not there yet, because in the beginning, almost nobody outside the park knew any of this. By the mid-1980s, the park had grown into something enormous. 75 rides spread across 250 acres, split into 3 sections: Water World for the slides and pools, Motor World for gas-powered go-karts and speedboats, and the Alpine Center, built right into the original ski slope. On a single busy weekend, as many as 12,000 people passed through the gates. Running a park that size meant hiring a small army of staff. An action park hired almost entirely teenagers. One security director said he landed that job at just 21, after 2 years working other roles at the park. That wasn't unusual. Training sessions technically existed, but former employees say they often weren't taken seriously. One staff member recalled that lifeguard rescue drills regularly turned into a form of hazing. New hires were told to act as a drowning victim, and after the training was over, they'd sometimes just be left in the water to get themselves out. Most of the staff supervising rides that could genuinely kill someone were underage, undertrained, and by multiple accounts, sometimes drinking on the job themselves. Attendance was massive from day one. Word spread fast across the New York area about a park where you weren't just watching a ride happen to you, you were the one in control. For a generation of tri-state teenagers, Action Park became the defining summer memory of their whole childhood. That memory was about to get a lot more complicated. Let's go back to that opening story, the ride with the test dummies. Its real name was the Cannonball Loop, an enclosed water slide with a complete vertical loop, like a roller coaster, except made of fiberglass and water, with nothing but your own body weight providing the momentum. This is confirmed directly by Andy Mulvihill on the record decades later to the New York Times. Not a rumor. His own father's ride, his own account. And when the dummies failed, Gene's fix was to pay his staff $100 to be the first live test riders. Andy ended up going first himself, in full ice hockey gear, helmet, and pads. In his own words, it wasn't a ride you rode to have fun. It was a ride you rode to survive. Riders had to be weighed and positioned carefully before going down because the physics only worked in a narrow window. Too heavy, and you picked up dangerous speed through the loop. Too light, and you could get stuck upside down inside the tube. At least one rider actually did get stuck at the top, forcing the park to install an emergency hatch just to pull people out. New Jersey's State Safety Board eventually banned this ride outright, the first time that board had ever taken that step against any ride anywhere. In total, the Cannonball Loop was only actually open to the public for about 1 month, back in 1985, before regulators shut it down. That 1 month did plenty of damage. Riders reported entering the loop feet first and somehow exiting head first. One employee told a local newspaper there were, in his words, too many bloody noses and back injuries. Some riders came back with lacerations doctors couldn't immediately explain, until they realized the cuts were coming from the rider's own teeth, knocked loose by the impact and left embedded in the fiberglass walls of the slide itself. A former Navy physician who studied the ride estimated riders experience close to 9 Gs of force going through the loop, roughly what a fighter pilot pulls in a hard turn. Mulvihill reopened the ride anyway, more than once, over the years that followed. Each reopening produced more injuries before it was finally killed for good. The water rides weren't the only danger. Over in Motor World, guests could rent go-karts reportedly capable of speeds up to 55 miles an hour on tracks with minimal barriers, alongside small motorized speedboats on an open pond, with essentially no age or skill requirement beyond being tall enough to reach the pedals. And right in the middle of the park sat a beer tent, serving guests all day with little oversight of who was drinking before getting behind the wheel of a go-kart or a boat. According to former staff interviewed years later, An average day at Action Park saw somewhere between 50 and 100 injuries, a number that could double on the busiest weekends. The director of the emergency room at the nearest hospital said they'd treat 5 to 10 park-related injuries on the worst days. Action Park eventually bought the local township extra ambulances just to keep up with the volume. Here's the part almost nobody expects. The Cannonball Loop wasn't the deadliest ride in the park. That title belongs to something that sounds almost boring by comparison. The Wave Pool. Employees had a nickname for it, the Grave Pool. At certain times of day, staff cranked the wave machine up to swells strong enough to knock full-grown adults off their feet. In a pool packed with hundreds of people at once, many of whom couldn't swim well, some of whom had been drinking since the park sold alcohol on site with almost no oversight of who was actually consuming it. Part of the reason there was so little oversight comes down to a technicality. After the wave pool's first drowning, state regulators classified it not as a ride, but as a swimming pool, which meant the legal requirement was simply keeping the water clean and having certified lifeguards on duty. A pool that could generate 5-foot swells strong enough to knock down an adult was, on paper, held to the same safety standard as a hotel's kiddie pool. 3 of the park's 6 confirmed deaths happened in that single pool. Lifeguards stationed there described near constant chaos, guests getting pulled under and disoriented by the artificial current, families losing track of each other in water crowded with hundreds of bodies at once, and rescues happening so routinely that some staff said it barely registered as an emergency anymore. It became, in effect, the most dangerous swimming pool in America, operating under the same legal standard as somebody's backyard pool. Then there was the kayak experience. Guests paddling small kayaks through a moving water channel. In 1982, 27-year-old Jeffrey Nathan flipped his kayak and came into contact with water that investigators later found had a live wire running current directly into it. He was electrocuted. Even the rides that weren't inherently dangerous found ways to become dangerous through sheer negligence. The Tarzan swing dropped riders from a rope or into a pool fed by natural spring water. A shocking 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 to 30 degrees colder than the rest of the park. In 1984, one visitor suffered a fatal heart attack, believed triggered by the sudden cold water shock on impact. Then there was Roaring Rapids, a whitewater rafting ride that sounds tame compared to everything else on this list, and still wasn't. State accident reports from 1984 describe riders suffering fractured thigh bones, broken collarbones, and dislocated joints as their rafts slammed unpredictably into the concrete channel walls and into each other. Even the park's normal rides were producing injury reports that would shut down most modern amusement parks entirely. The state numbers back this up. In 1986 alone, the local newspaper reported the previous year's official accident toll at Action Park. More than 110 incidents, including 45 head injuries and 10 fractures. And that's just what actually got reported. The park was later found to have a policy of only reporting accidents serious enough to require an ambulance, meaning the real number was almost certainly far higher. By the mid-1980s, Action Park had built an entire business model around handing the public control of dangerous machinery. With almost no engineering oversight, minimal staff training, much of the staff was legally underage themselves, some ride operators as young as 14, and alcohol freely available throughout. The accidents weren't a side effect of this park. They were, functionally, the product. So how did a place with a body count keep its doors open for 18 years? The answer isn't luck, it's fraud, and it starts with the very first death on record. Over Action Park's 18 years, 6 people died as a direct result of accidents on its rides. In July of 1980, 19-year-old George Larson Jr. rode the Alpine slide after hours and flew off the track entirely, striking his head on a rock beside the path. He fell into a coma and died days later. Here's where this stops being a tragedy and starts being fraud. Action Park told regulators the incident happened at night, in the rain, and that Larson was on the clock as an employee, which meant, under the rules at the time, the park wasn't required to formally report his death at all. Larson's own mother and brother later said on camera in the 2020 documentary about the park that he never actually worked there. They believe the employee detail was fabricated specifically to dodge the reporting requirement and protect the park's public record. And this wasn't a one-time cover story. Between 1979 and 1986, state inspectors cited Action Park for safety violations repeatedly, including letting minors operate rides and failing to report accidents. A local newspaper investigation later found that, despite all those citations, the park was fined only a single time in that entire 7-year stretch. Every other amusement park in New Jersey got fined on a first offense. Action Park, according to that same investigation, did not. A reporter covering the park at the time offered a simple explanation. As the largest employer in the entire county, Action Park had a level of local influence most businesses never get. In 1982, 15-year-old George Lopez drowned in the wave pool. That same year, 27-year-old Jeffrey Nathan was electrocuted on the kayak experience. 2 deaths within 1 week of each other at the same park. In 1984, an unnamed visitor suffered the fatal heart attack on the Tarzan swing. That same year, 20-year-old Donald DePass drowned in the cliff dive pool. 15 feet deep, murky, dark-bottomed water, so difficult to see through that lifeguards, including Andy Mulvihill himself, had to search for his body underwater by feel before finding him. In 1987, 18-year-old Gregory Grandchamps became the 6th and final confirmed death, also in the wave pool. 6 deaths. Over 100 lawsuits, and Action Park did not collapse from public outrage. So how did a park with this record survive lawsuit after lawsuit for 18 years? The answer starts with where the money actually came from. Action Park's parent company was substantially financed by a man named Robert Brennan, a financier who'd built his own fortune-running boiler room stock schemes, not unlike the ones that got Mulvihill in trouble in the first place. With Brennan's money behind him and no legitimate insurer willing to cover a park with this many incidents, Mulvihill created his own insurance company instead. A firm called London and World Assurance, incorporated offshore in the Cayman Islands, existing largely on paper. When guests sued, Mulvihill's lawyers rarely settled. Instead, they took nearly every case to trial, dragging things out for years and burying injured guests and grieving families in legal costs many of them couldn't afford to sustain. And if Mulvihill did lose a case, former employees say he sometimes simply didn't pay. This wasn't a fringe legal strategy that stayed hidden. Over the life of the park, this pattern generated more than 100 lawsuits, an extraordinary volume for a single business, touching everything from liability waivers to assumption of risk law to the basic question of what happens when a company effectively insures itself. Mulvihill ran in the same circles as other big personalities of the era. He was reportedly friendly with Donald Trump, who at one point reportedly considered investing in the park himself. In 1989, the fraud finally caught up with the operation. A state investigation produced a 110-count indictment against the 9 companies running the park, and Mulvihill pleaded guilty to 5 insurance fraud-related charges. His financier, Robert Brennan, was separately convicted of money laundering and bankruptcy fraud and sentenced to nearly a decade in prison. With its main source of money gone, Action Park's parent company collapsed into bankruptcy in 1996, and the park closed for good. Not a safety board, not a jury verdict. Bankruptcy. One financial crime finally catching up with another. In 1998, resort developer IntraWest bought the property and reopened it under a new name, with certified lifeguards, modern engineering standards, and the complete removal of the park's most notorious rides. The alcohol tents disappeared. Guests were even asked to cover up offensive tattoos. Condos went up where Motor World's go-karts used to run. The Cannonball Loop, after nearly its entire life spent flip-flopping between open and banned, was finally torn out for good. In 2010, 2 years before he died, Mulvihill led a group of investors to buy the park back and briefly restore the Action Park name, reportedly even drawing up plans for an updated version of the Cannonball Loop. That version of the ride was never actually built. In 2018, the park changed hands again, this time to Joe Hession, a Vernon native who had actually worked at Action Park himself as a teenager in the 1980s. Under his ownership, the park still operates today as Mountain Creek, modernized, regulated, and almost unrecognizable from the place he once worked at as a kid. The park's real second life happened in pop culture. In 2020, HBO released a documentary about it called Class Action Park, which reignited public fascination almost overnight. The film closes on a quiet, deliberate image: George Larson's mother visiting her son's grave with his younger brother, a reminder in its final moments of exactly who paid the real cost for what the park promised everyone else. Some who've studied the story have drawn a straight line from Action Park to more recent cautionary tales. One financial journalist has compared its spirit directly to modern scandals like Fire Festival and Theranos. Big promises, minimal oversight, and a founder convinced the rules simply didn't apply to him. Not everyone agrees with that comparison. One former guest has pushed back by pointing out that whatever else was true about the place, Action Park actually delivered exactly what it promised, for better and for worse. The park's reputation even made its way to Hollywood, loosely inspiring the 2018 comedy Action Point, starring Johnny Knoxville. Critics repeatedly described the documentary's tone as almost impossible to pin down, a nostalgic trip back to carefree childhood summers until the exact moment you remember real people actually died there. The park's story has even made its way into law schools. A practicing attorney and adjunct law professor now teaches an actual course partly built around Action Park, using it to walk students through real regulatory gaps, like the fact that fixed-site amusement parks have no federal ride oversight at all, leaving safety almost entirely up to inconsistent state rules. As that professor has put it, Action Park created a strange disconnect between what people expect when they walk into an amusement park and what they were actually agreeing to the moment they walked through Action Park's gates. That contradiction is really the whole emotional core of this story, and it's worth sitting with honestly instead of playing it purely for shock. For an entire generation of kids from the New York area, Action Park is a genuine, cherished memory of what summer used to feel like. One writer who grew up visiting the park has compared trading Action Park stories with other New Jersey natives to swapping war stories with combat veterans. Everyone who was there seems to remember coming closest to real danger on one specific ride or another. It's also a story about a business that let 6 people die and kept operating anyway, protected less by luck than by a founder willing to falsify records, run a fake insurance company, and outrun lawsuits until the money finally ran out. Both of those things are true about the same place, at the same time. That contradiction is exactly why, decades later, people still can't stop talking about it. Thank you for watching, and if you are interested in more stories like this, please like this video and subscribe.